All right, we want to talk about polynomials. Polynomials is just a bunch of different things. We'll look at them in a second. But if you only have one piece, one thing, it's called a monomial. Two pieces, well, what is the word for two? Bi, so it's a binomial. And a three-piece term is going to be a trinomial. Now, let's look at some examples. So if I look here, the first one, I have an n and a 4. So how many pieces do you have? 2. That means this is a binomial. The next one, well, you only have one thing here. You have 5n. One thing, that's a monomial. The next one, well, I have a piece here, plus a piece here, plus a piece here. The plus signs sort of give you a clue. Well, there's 3 pieces, so that's a trinomial. Okay, so what we're looking at are monomials, single pieces, binomials, 2 pieces, and trinomials, 3 pieces. Now, what do we get when we have 4 times 2n plus 3? Well, we distribute the 4 through to each of the 2 pieces. It gets multiplied through to both of the pieces, and that ends up giving us this answer of 8n plus 12. So we distributed the 4 through the parentheses. Well, what are we going to do if we have an quantity n plus 4 times the other quantity n plus 3? Now, what we're going to do is let's imagine it like Mr. Hickam and Mrs. Hickam meeting up with my buddy Mr. Caro and Mrs. Caro and shaking hands. Now, here's what I mean. So here we have Mr. Hickam and Mrs. Hickam, and they bump into Mr. Caro and Mrs. Caro. Well, I'm going to say, hey, Mr. Caro, how you doing? I'm going to shake hands with Mr. Caro, and then I'm going to shake hands with his wife and say, hey, how you doing, Mrs. Caro? And then what's going to happen? Well, Mrs. Hickam's going to shake hands with Mr. Caro, and then she's going to shake hands with Mrs. Caro. Now, I'm not going to shake hands with my wife. That'd be sort of weird, and Mr. Caro's not going to shake hands with his wife. So what happens is I get distributed through to each of the pieces, and Mrs. Hickam goes ahead and gets distributed through to both of the pieces. So how do we apply that to the original problem of n plus 4 times n plus 3? Well, this end is going to shake hands right here, and this end is going to shake hands here, or it's going to get distributed through. Each of the front pieces is going to get distributed through. Well, n times n is what? N squared. N times that 3 is 3n. Now we are multiplying. And now the 4. The 4 is going to get distributed through. 4 times n is 4n. 4 times the 3 is 12. So we now have 4 total pieces here. But notice that this 3n and 4n can be combined. We can combine those like terms. And we end up with an n squared plus 7n plus 12. Now, what if we have a binomial, n plus 2, times a trinomial? Well, think about it. You have 2 pieces times something that's 3 pieces. You're going to end up with 6 pieces. What's going to happen? Well, I'm going to shake hands here. I'm going to shake hands here. And then they brought their son or daughter. Well, in this case, Caro's brought their daughter along, and I shake hands there. So the n gets distributed through to each of the 3 pieces. N times n squared is n cubed. N times 4n is 4n squared. N times the 5 is 5n. Now the 2 gets distributed through to each of the pieces. 2n squared, 2 times 4n is 8n, and then 2 times the 5 is 10. Now what I need to do is combine like terms. Well, n cubes by itself. 4n squared plus 2n squared gives you 6n squareds. We have 5n plus 8n, so that's 13n, and then the number 10. One more. What if we end up with this gargantuan man, a trinomial times a trinomial, a 3-piecer times another 3-piecer? Well, 3 times 3 is 9. We're going to end up with 9 pieces here. So we got to be sort of careful. This is going to get rather difficult if we're not careful with how we do things. Well, the n squared gets multiplied through times n squared. That's n to the 4th. N squared times that 3n is 3, and that's n to the 3rd. And n squared times the 5 is 5n squared. Let's now do the 4n. 4n times n squared is 4n cubed. 4n times 3n is 12n squared. And 4n times the 5 is 20n. Almost there. Let's go with purple. 2 distributed through is 2n squared. 2 through that 3n is 6n. And 2 through to the 5 is 10. Now all we have to do is combine like terms and we're set. N to the fourth is by itself. 3n to the third, 4n to the third. That's all we have. 3 and 4 is what? 7. 5n squared, 12n squared, 2n squared. That's 19n squareds. And then finally, 20n plus 6n is 26n. That's all that can be combined. And don't forget, you still have Mr. 10 right there. And there's our final answer. It takes a little while. Just be careful and you'll be fine.